Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And today is our science unit, and we're talking about various things involved in the world of science. Today, we're going to talk about sound. I know a lot of us are concerned about what things look like. We like to take pictures and stuff like that. But there is sound out there. We listen to music. We have conversations with people. But sometimes we may not be able to recognize our own voice if we hear a recording of it.
It's kind of interesting. I know that... several years ago, I found an old tape, and I think I was about 18 on the tape. And I remember thinking, I sounded different then. This is kind of an interesting unit for Tom and I because we record all the time, and we hear our voices. It's been so many years since I ever had, this particular thought go through my mind, like, ooh, do I sound like that? Yeah. But for most people who don't work in the recording industry, I think this is true. I think when you hear your voice, you think, wait, that's not how it sounds like in my head. What's going on? Yeah.
I think we all have that experience when we're kids. I remember when I was very young, my oldest brother brought home a tape recorder, and I was fascinated by that device. He'd say, okay, Tom, say something. So he'd turn on the microphone, and I would go, and then I'd listen to it back, and I'd just laugh and have a great time.
Those are fun, yeah.
That. But I think the time that I couldn't recognize my own voice has passed into the past, or it was a long time ago. So I don't really know that sensation anymore. But some people out there might still have this sensation. Gee, do I really sound like that? That's not my voice. That must be somebody else. So that's why we're asking the question today, do I really sound like that? Is that my voice? Let's find out what this is all about right now, everybody. Let's listen to the entire contents of our lesson now one time.
Have you ever listened to a recording of your own voice and thought, do I really sound like that? We all think we sound a certain way because that's how we perceive our own voices when we speak. Some assume they have the rich tones of a classically trained actor, while others imagine they speak in the contralto of an opera singer. So, why does a recording of our own voice sound so oddly high? The answer lies in the biology of our ears and the physics of how we hear sound. Sound takes the form of a wave as it moves through the air, but it also vibrates through solid material, such as bone. When we hear an external sound, it's transmitted through the air and received by the outer ear, eardrum, and middle ear. Inside that is an organ called the Cochlea, which passes sound information along to our brains. However, the bones and other tissues inside our skull conduct sound waves straight from our vocal cords to the cochlea. When sound is transmitted this way, the lower frequency sounds are emphasized. This explains why our voices sound higher on recordings. When we speak, we're hearing both kinds of sound, and our brain blends the information. With the lower frequency sounds included, our voices sound deeper and stronger. Whereas, when we listen to a recording, we only receive external information. Hence, our voices seem higher and weaker. Don't be ashamed, though. Everyone experiences this phenomenon. While the voice on the recording may sound different, it definitely is you. And many people appreciate the way you sound.
Okay, let's get to it. Let's try to answer this question. Do I really sound like that? Yes, you probably do, but it might be unusual the first time you hear a recording of your own voice. So here in the first paragraph, we begin by asking another question. Have you ever listened to a recording of your own voice and thought, do I really sound like that? Now, as Stephanie mentioned earlier, we do this voice announcing stuff all the time, so we're used to hearing our voices. But yeah, we have to think hard back to the first time we recorded our voices. And yes, we listened to a recording of our own voice, and then we thought, wow, do I really sound like that? Is that really my voice? That doesn't sound like me. It must be somebody else.
Yeah, the other thing that's interesting is sometimes I'll hear a recording even today, and I'll think, oh, I sound just like my sister, which I never think that when I'm speaking and my own ears are, transmitting that sound into my brain. I think I sound like me. But then when I hear some recordings, I think, oh my gosh, that sounds just like Linda. So anyway, it's kind of an interesting phenomenon, and it's part of science. This is our science unit, so we'll be talking about why we hear what we hear, and there are some good reasons why we think when we listen to recorded versions of our voice that we sound much higher than we think we should sound. So yeah, do I really sound like that? We all think we sound a certain way because that's how we perceive our own voices when we speak. If you perceive something, guys, that's your interpretation of it. I don't know. People can have different ideas about something. It's how they perceive it, how they look at it. If you have experience with something or you have more knowledge about a situation than other people, you might perceive something differently than they do, or your background might come into play in how you interpret something. So when you perceive something, you're just aware of it, you come to understand it in some way. So there are some reasons why we might sound a little high, or at least higher than we think we should, when we listen to recordings.
Indeed, and I think most of us believe that we've got really nice voices, so when we hear our voice recorded, we might be a little disappointed. I thought I sounded better than that, and some assume they have the rich tones of a classically trained actor. Yeah, I sound like, those Shakespearean actors.
Laurence Olivier.
Yeah, exactly, or Peter O'Toole or whatever.
Yeah.
I think I have a voice like that, so yes, I assume that. Some people would assume that. They just think something's true without really asking any questions. That's what to assume means. And yeah, if you're a classically trained actor, you will have those rich tones. You won't have this nasal sounding tone or squeaky tones or whatever. You'll have this very rich tone. And others would imagine they speak in the contralto of an opera singer. I don't know the different voices in opera there, but I guess there are different, like bass and alto and soprano. Maybe you should tell us what a contralto is.
Contraltos are quite rare these days, but a contralto is the lowest female voice there is. So right after the contralto comes the tenor, who is the highest of the male voices. Yeah, you don't often hear contraltos. That's quite low. It goes soprano, mezzo soprano, and then contralto. So yeah, that's a very deep voice. And probably if you were to hear a recording of a contralto, you might think it's a tenor sometimes.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah. I guess a lot of people wish they had a lower tone of voice. I've noticed something here in Taiwan, though, that's very different from America. In America, people with lower voices are considered to be more authoritative. They get more of the jobs as news anchors who sit at the desk and report the news. But it's different here in Taiwan. The women's voices here tend to be much higher. And I know when I first came to Taiwan, I had clients that would constantly say, oh, can you speak a little higher? And want you to sound very sweet, which is not the preferred style of voice, at least in America. So I think different cultures appreciate different types of voices as well.
Yep, it kind of depends on where you are.
True.
So here's another question. So why does a recording of our own voice sound so oddly high? Oddly here just means unusually high. You hear a recording of your own voice and you think, my voice isn't that high. My voice is really deep. I shouldn't be sounding like this. But yeah, if you make a recording and then you think you're sounding this low, and then when you play it back, it sounds like this, then you're wondering, gee, why is my voice so unusually high? Why is it so oddly high?
Yeah, I think guys would tend to think that more than the women, but yeah, oddly just means something you're not expecting. You could have said weirdly high, unusually high, Tom used. Those are all good. So it's different from what you expected. Yeah, sometimes people can say he's oddly tall. You know, this guy might be taller than a professional basketball player. You don't expect to find people that tall around you unless maybe you play on a basketball team. But yeah, something you're not expecting is odd or oddly. Oddly here, of course, can be an adverb. Or sometimes you can use it as an adjective, but here, oddly high. Yeah, something you don't expect. We're going to keep talking about the science behind why we perceive our voices to be lower than they actually are. But first, guys, we're going to take just a few minutes and listen to our Chinese teacher. Check out the voice.
谢谢美语老师。Hello, my name is Shelby. 现在做克漏字讲解。文章一开始，你是否听到自己录音的声音，并想着，我真的听起来像那样吗？我们都以为自己声音听起来是某样子，因为这是我们感知自己声音的方式。第二句的后半，因为 That's how we perceive our own voice. That is 后面接 how 引导的名词子句，当作主词补语。动词 perceive 察觉、意识到，后面直接加受词。第一题，有些人空格，他们有丰富的语调，而有些人想象他们就像是女低音歌手。空格前一句说明，我们都 think 自己是某个声音，而这句以 some while others 来举例说明。后半句提出另外一些人 imagine 自己像歌剧的演唱者，可以推知空格一应该是与这些动词类似。有些人认为自己具有丰富的语调，所以我们答案选 C assume 以为。其他选项的意思 A 让留下深刻印象， B 使沮丧， D 重新开始。那么为什么录音的声音这么高呢？
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, let's continue with our lesson. So we're trying to answer this question, why do I really sound so high? Or do I really sound like that? Well, the answer lies in the biology of our ears and the physics of how we hear sound. Okay, so we're going to give you a scientific answer. It's going to involve biology, which is the construction of the body and the tissues and the bones and stuff like that. And then, of course, we've also got physics, which is all about the movement of objects in space and stuff like that, especially sound waves. So yeah, it's a combination of biology and physics here.
Yeah, physics is kind of tough as a subject in school. For me, at least, I wasn't as interested in science, although I did take biology. Physics is concerned with nature, and it focuses on matter and energy. Sound waves would be part of physics. Mechanics, heat, light, those are all part of physics. So if you go on to college and study physics, that's what you can look forward to. We're going to talk about how not only the biology or the makeup of our ears affects the sound, but the physics. And that's going to relate more to these waves we've been talking about that actually brings the sound into your brain, into your skull.
Okay, so yes, indeed, sound takes the form of a wave as it moves through the air. Lots of things take the form of a wave. Light comes in waves. Radio frequencies or radio signals are in waves. And sound is also in the form of a wave, and then it moves through the air, but it also vibrates through solid material. So yes, sound waves move through the air, but also sound will vibrate through solid solid material. Now, here we've got the verb to vibrate. That just means something basically moves because of sound. When there's an earthquake, for example, you might hear vibrations in your house. The sounds of the shelves shaking and things like that, those are vibrations. A vibration is a noun, and to vibrate, well, that's the verb.
Yeah. And actually, if you sing, you've probably noticed some people, their voice goes up and down. That's called vibrato. And it's kind of that moving of the sound. It can be straight like la or la. That's vibrato. So there we're talking about that sound vibrating as well. So yeah, to vibrate. Other things that vibrate could be your phone. When you turn the sound off, you can leave the vibration on. So it kind of moves a little bit. That is a vibration. So vibrate, though, is the verb form. Vibration is the noun. Solid material as opposed to gas, which could be, just the atmosphere outside, air. And then there's liquid like water. Solid, though, is firm, stable. You can't put your fist through it. So, yeah, it has to go through solid material. Here we're using bone as an example, which is very solid.
Yep.
Probably some of our listeners have broken bones before.
Yeah, probably. I have not myself, but that could be quite painful during the recovery process. But yeah, solid and liquid and gas, those are the three main states of matter. And solid is like, as you said, something that is hard, like bone or something. Or it could be wood, a wall, metal, or whatever. So when we hear an external sound, it's transmitted through the air and received by the outer ear, eardrum, and middle ear. So external just means something outside. Maybe we hear thunder, for example. Well, that's an external sound. It comes from the outside, and then it moves through the air, or it is transmitted through the air. Transmit as a verb just means to send something from one place to another. You might transmit a radio signal, for example. And this transmission goes through the air, and then you hear it. Your outer ear picks up the sound of the thunder, and then it goes inside to the eardrum, and I think there are 3 bones in there, and then eventually it gets to the middle ear.
Now, in that middle ear, inside that it says is an organ, part of your body, called the cochlea. The first time I ever saw this word before, when I was growing up, I'd never heard of it, to be honest. And then they invented a way for deaf people to have some sort of surgery where they would place something inside someone's brain in the cochlea. It's called a cochlear implant. And now people who are very hard of hearing, or some even deaf, can suddenly start hearing sounds on the outside world, which is really cool. So cochlea, that's the organ, and that passes sound information along to our brains. So all of this transmission works. Yes, it goes through your ear, but it isn't until it reaches your brain that you actually can, I think, translate the sound into something you understand.
Turns it into electric impulses or whatever that your brain can interpret and stuff like that. However, the bones and other tissues inside our skull conduct sound waves straight from our vocal cords to the cochlea. So yes, we've got the bones, and then we've got other tissues, which could be the skin, the muscle, stuff like that. Anything organic inside our body is a tissue, and they conduct sound. You could say they transmit the sound as well, straight from your vocal cords to the cochlea. Vocal cords are those things inside your throat that vibrate together.
They are muscles.
Yeah, they're muscles. And, of course, you need to take care of your vocal cords as well. And, of course, they cause sound in our throats, and that's the thing that makes us speak. And so, yes, indeed, that's how we conduct those sound waves straight from the vocal cords, through the head, through the skull, through the tissues, eventually to the ear or the cochlea.
I wanted to mention this verb conduct has the same meaning as transmit right here. So that's kind of a cool thing you can use. We use it a lot when they're talking about electricity. It conducts electricity. So yeah, so it goes from all of those areas and it finally reaches the cochlea. When the sound is transmitted this way, the lower frequency sounds are emphasized. Here, frequency just means how fast or slow that wave goes, which is kind of cool. People who have lower frequency sound ability or people, you know that dogs can hear higher frequency sounds than humans can, which I feel bad for them. I think it hurts their ears when they hear something very, very high, which it doesn't bother humans because our ears aren't as sensitive. But yeah, dogs can really hear high-pitched or higher frequency sounds. If you emphasize something, you put more stress on it, or you want to point that out in some way. So these lower frequency sounds are emphasized. That's why we think our voice sounds lower than it really does. This explains why our voices sound higher on recordings. When we speak, we're hearing kind of a blend of sounds, so you hear both kinds of sound, and our brain blends the information. To blend is another word for mix. So you blend together, you mix together things, and they become one substance.
Yeah, if you work at a recording studio, of course, you will use a mixing board, which mixes the sounds or blends the sounds together.
True.
However, if you're making a smoothie or something, then you take ice and some kind of fruit, maybe some sugar and water, and you blend it together in a blender. And that, of course, is very tasty on a hot summer day.
Oh, yeah.
Now, with the lower frequency sounds included, our voices sound deeper and stronger. That means how we hear them ourselves. When we talk, we think we're sounding really low. Whereas, when we listen to a recording, we only receive external information. So, whereas just means, well, in this case, so you've already mentioned one situation, and then you said, well, the other situation, or whereas, in this situation, when we listen to a recording of our own voice, then we receive external information. It's not going through our head anymore. So, bye-bye low frequency sounds.
We use whereas when we're trying to compare two different situations. I could say, Tom typically eats Chinese food every night with his family, whereas I will sometimes make something at home that is more closely resembling American food. So yeah, you can use whereas when you're comparing or contrasting two different things. So if you just listen to a recording, you're not getting the benefit of those lower frequency sounds that come through your brain. So hence, or this is the conclusion here. Hence, or to conclude, our voices seem higher and weaker when we're just listening to a playback of a recording. So I think people are getting more familiar with their voices even when they don't work as voice artists like Tom and I do, because people are taking all those videos these days and putting them online.
Yeah, we hear recordings of ourselves all the time, so we're probably more and more familiar with the sound of our voice. But still, you might think your voice sounds higher than you think it does, so don't be ashamed, though. Everyone experiences this phenomenon. It happens to everybody. You're not the only one, and while the voice on the recording may sound different, it definitely is you. Don't think that, oh, that's somebody else's voice, that's not me. No, for sure, 100%, definitely, it is you. And many people appreciate the way you sound. So yeah, treat it as a special characteristic of your person, and everybody will love you as a result.
Definitely here is our last vocab word, and it's an adverb. It just means without a doubt. You can use it for emphasis. So I will definitely be there at your party tonight. I wouldn't miss it. So it is definitely you. You just have to get used to that new kind of higher sound. Right now, we're going to listen one more time to the beautiful voice of our Chinese teacher.
第二题，这答案空格我们耳朵的生理特性以及如何听到声音的物理机制。这句提到答案 answer， 并提到 the biology of our ears 以及 the physics of how we hear sound。可以推知问题的答案在于这两点中，所以答案选 A lies in 表示在于。另外其他选项 B 接管 C 导致 D 作为。第二句，声音用波的形式在空气中传播，但也会在固体中震动。 我们看一下这句惯用语 take the form of 采用什么的形式，例如 take the form of reading 采取阅读的形式。连接词 as 后面加一个子句 it moves through the air 表示 when 来解释，更后面的 but 子句中的动词 vibrate 是起共鸣或者震动。第三句，当我们听到外部的声音，它传播透过空气并被外耳、鼓膜等接收。It's transmitted 传递光或热等。过去分词字尾是短母音加子音，所以重复 t 再加 ed。第三题，更进去空格，一个叫耳郭的器官，它将声音呢传递到大脑。这题要考将地方副词 inside that 放在句首的倒装句型。在这种倒装句，主词、动词前后直接交换，不用加上助动词来写成疑问句的格式。空格这里是动词的位置，主词是 an organ， 所以答案选 B is。 下一句，然而骨头和其他组织会传送声波，从声带到耳郭。声字 tissue 是指动植物的细胞组织。Conduct sound waves 传送声波。当声音以这种方式传播时，更凸显了低频。接着到第三段，第二句，当我们说话的时候，听到两种不同的声音，而大脑会融合这些讯息。Blend the information 融合这些讯息。Blend 使混合，它的用法 blend A and B 或者blend A with B， 又或者 blend A into B， 字尾加 er 变成 blender 就是搅拌机。第四题，因为比较低频的声音怎么样子，我们的声音听起来会比较低沉。然而当我们听录音的时候呢，只收到外部的声音。这题要测验 with 加受词加受词补语来补充说明主要句子的附带状态。The lower frequency sounds 低频音是受词，它是被包含在我们声音里的，所以用 PP 形态，答案选 D included。 第五题空格，我们的声音似乎更高更弱。前一句说，当我们听录音的声音时，只收到外部的声音讯息，也就是说没有了低频音，因此声音会听起来比较高，所以答案选 C hence 因此。我们看其他选项 A 同样的， B 相反的， D 此外，都与句意不搭。我们再看下一句，然而请不要感到难为情，每个人都有经历这种现象。 Be ashamed 表示感到难为情的，后面可以加上原因 of something 或者 to be， 例如说 She was ashamed of having failed in the test， 她因为考试不及格而感到羞愧。所以尽管录音的声音听起来不一样，但这绝对就是你，而且许多人欣赏你的声音。以上是今天的讲解，谢谢收听。
That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And yes, you get to hear our voices, but someday we'd like to hear what all of you sound like. I'm very sure your voices would sound wonderful. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.